Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes, but if everybody can answer the polling question, that'd be great, because we're going to use this technology throughout the session and want to make sure it works for you. So if you could do it if you haven't already. And if you have any questions, let us know. Looks like some folks are still working on it. So we're going to look at the responses in just a second here when I flip the slides, so I just want to make sure you see the instructions. So you're texting to the number 22333, and then in the body of the text, you have to type in GT2015A, and then a space, and then your brilliant answer. And what's the best thing about working for the state of California? All right, you ready to see some of the results? You guys aren't, can you see from there? There you go. Yeah, so you have to be careful what you type. Yeah. So let's just scroll through here.
Man.
Retirement, all right, that's a good one. People.
Security.
I assume Ben WF8 is benefits. What do you guys think? Oh, look at that, shouting it out. Retirement, security, and medical benefits. I think the system just puts that up there. Okay. Corner offices? Is that what I heard? Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for participating in that poll. That's a chance to start the interaction that we're going to have throughout this morning's session, but also a chance to get some information. What do you love about working for the state of California? One of the topics we're going to talk about this morning is making the state a destination workplace, and doing that through effective recruitment and retention practices, because as you've seen through many of the responses, besides benefits and providing the services that you provide to constituents and citizens, are the people you work with, the people you get to interact with. And the importance of having the right workforce all around you is critical to becoming a destination workplace at the department level, at the state level, and at the unit level. Okay? And by the way, we'll have these slides posted on the website for this session, so you'll get a chance to see all these answers again. So again, thanks for coming this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of a destination workplace. We're going to also talk through recruitment and retention strategies, specifically focused on specific generation. I think we hear a lot about the millennial generation, and I think this morning's opening session talked about that. But we're also going to focus on Generation X, that generation between the baby boomers and millennials that are mid-career, that are looking for an opportunity to have flexibility and stability in their lives and maybe come into state service but find challenges in doing that. And then we're going to have a panel discussion and hear from two of your colleagues who work for different departments, talk about their experience coming into state service mid-career. I'm Julie Quinn. I work for Deloitte Consulting. I'm the Office Managing Director here locally. I lead our advisory services for Deloitte, working mostly with state government clients, specifically the state of California. So this is a group and a topic near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to be here. On our panel today, we have Stephanie Doherty. She's the Chief of Enterprise Planning and Performance, I had to make sure I got that right, at DMV. And Lyndon Greco, he's a Finance Budget Analyst at Department of Finance. So they're both going to be providing their perspective as we move forward. So now we have another polling question, so take out your phones. When you think of a destination workplace, what comes to mind? And think of it from your current experience. Think about it when you're looking for your next promotion opportunity. Think about it when you entered state service, whether you entered, from school or you entered from a mid-career. What's the characteristic of a destination workplace? What makes it special? Okay, let's start looking at the answers. Oh, here we go, sorry. A new building, all right. Physical space is important, absolutely. Challenging, innovative work, challenging work, career path, good working relationship with coworkers, great coworkers, engaging diversity and learning, customer service focus, opportunities for growth, free parking. I knew free parking was going to show up. That's a huge benefit. Where avocation and vocation meet. All right, that's great. Very, very deep thinking there. Vision from the executive team. All right, let's make sure I go down here a little bit. Sorry, I don't have my mouse here, and this screen overlay is affecting how I can scroll down. Let's see, what else we have? Ability to problem solve, positive work environment, the people. Okay, great. Well, thank you for that feedback. It's important to think about what it means to be a destination workplace, because as you can see from these answers, it means different things to different people. There's different areas of emphasis. It's either the coworkers you're working for, it's the perks and benefits of your physical surroundings, it's the benefits, it's the mission and the services that you provide. It's a wide variety of aspects. But why is it important to be a destination workplace? Besides making you feel good, right? That's the morale boost that a destination workplace provides. But it's also an ability to attract and retain the best talent. People want to come work for that organization. People want to stay there. People get engaged in the mission and the delivery of the services and want to stay within that organization and grow in their career, which is really important because how much time do you spend right now trying to fill vacancies? Is that a fun thing to do? No. Is it really quick and easy? No. All right, so we want to keep and retain as many people as we can. And having a destination workplace is important as part of that. So what are some of the challenges, though, in creating that destination workplace? There's many challenges, right? There's the whole issue of the aging workforce, which we've been hearing about for years now, and it's starting to come to fruition. I'm sure many of you are seeing more and more retirements come through your organization. Yeah, I see some nodding heads out there. The numbers are growing, and if you read the Bee every couple of months, you see a story about an increase in retirements from baby boomers, et cetera. But if you look at that statistic, and that statistic has been out there for quite some time, 50% of the state supervisors and managers are approaching retirement. And the sophistication of the succession planning efforts that are in place vary widely from department to department. So that's a challenge, right? Making sure there's enough folks in the pipeline to provide leadership and executive decision-making to keep the organization moving forward, as well as maintain and enhance the culture. The high vacancy rate. There's quite a few vacancies in departments. I'm sure you guys have, I see nodding heads again from folks. And many of them are at the manager and supervisor level. It's hard to keep people in those slots because they're moving up because leaders are leaving and retiring. So it's hard to fill those positions, and it's hard to bring people in from outside to fill them. It's hard to make sure people are ready through the promotion process to fill those slots. It's a real gap. It's a real challenge. From a pay standpoint, salaries are not increasing at the same rate as costs are. In fact, I looked at a statistic that said if you take into account inflation over the last 2 decades, take-home pay has stayed flat, which is phenomenal because Does everything cost the same it did 2 decades ago? No. So that's a challenge as well, because the other aspects of compensation are benefits, and those have a higher and higher cost, which, affect the ability to make pay raises. And then the higher worker costs, that piece there. Healthcare and retirement costs are becoming more and more of not only a political issue, but a real factor as retirements happen. So there's some definitely challenges for state government in recruiting a new pool and creating that environment that you want to be that destination workplace. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the workforce in terms of who's actually there. So I'm sure some of you have seen slides like this before, but if you look at who's in the workforce right now, just in general, this is the overall population. But if you look at the state's staff numbers from CalHR, it's very similar. The baby boomers, just by sheer number, a very large generation from 1945 to 1964. The Gen X group from 65 to 80 is the smallest generation in terms of numbers. And then, of course, Millennials, which we hear about a lot. That's another huge generation that'll be as big, if not bigger, than the baby boomer generation. So sandwiched in between there, we have folks who are at end of career, ready to retire, have a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of history, a lot of key relationships and how to get things done. They're leaving. We have a lot of new entry-level folks who are very excited to come into state government and change the world and get involved, but we don't have as many at that middle level. And so that's what we're going to talk about, is how we can bring in folks at that middle level to help balance out the culture, help balance out the folks who are potentially getting ready to retire versus the folks who are new. And again, the point there at the bottom is that this isn't just a problem in state government. This is a problem across America, across the world, in terms of who's in the workforce. And there's competition for resources. But one of the neat things about the Generation X entity, those are folks, so if you think 1965 to 1980, those are folks who are turning 50 this year at the one end, and folks who are 35 at the bottom end. So mid-career, probably have families, probably have a need to probably come back home and have the grandparents help out with raising the kids, have a desire for more stability. So there's a real a cultural or societal benefit to attracting this particular generation into state service, because they're seeking what state service has to offer, which is stability and the ability to give back and the ability to learn and to grow within a system, but still have that stability. So again, Gen X, tech savvy. I think there's a lot of discussion about the millennial generation being very tech savvy. If you think about it, 1965, the folks that were born then may not have at birth had technology, but certainly when they were in college they did, right? High school and college. So through their professional life, tech savvy, entrepreneurial, independent. This is the generation of latchkey kids. I'm sure some of you have heard of that phrase, or maybe some of you were latchkey kids, or maybe you still are, I don't know. And then again, starting the families and where they are in their life creates a real need for flexibility and stability. And this interesting fact at the bottom, more than 30% of Gen X plan to leave their current employer within 3 years. So that's a pretty interesting statistic, right? Hopefully they're not leaving state service in 3 years, but wherever they're leaving, and for whatever reason they're leaving, it's a pretty mobile workforce segment. They're coming and going. So it's an opportunity to bring them in to the workforce and state government and leverage what they've learned in the private sector, or leverage what they've learned at home, right? Because some may not be coming from a work environment. So what do you do? How do you combine that idea of a destination workplace with a particular generational group that you're trying to target? And I'd be curious, we have a kind of a Q&A session at the end, if any of you have experience in bringing those two together. But we offer 4 ideas here of things to think about, both from what we've learned serving our state government clients, what we've learned from research around the country, and some of our experts within Deloitte who study the workplace and talent management strategies. The first one is to broaden your focus, making sure you're looking not just at the entry-level folks to join the workforce. What can you do to bring in folks mid-career? It's not easy in state service. There aren't as many classifications that folks can move into. There aren't as many classifications at what might be the right salary level to bring folks into. So there's some trade-offs there that you have to think through and some strategies, and we'll get to that in a second. The second one is celebrating the benefits of state service. Doing a good job of talking about being a destination employer at the state level, at the department level, at your program level, whatever it might be, and really talking about and documenting why what you do matters. You know, what service are you providing? Are you providing, helping fight fires? Are you helping preserve our parks? Are you helping children get the money and the benefits they need to, you know, the children get an education? Families who are having a tough time, making sure they have the resources they need to make their lives better. I mean, there's a lot of great mission-driven things that happen in state service that are a huge benefit and are very attractive to the workforce. And doing a good job at getting out there and talking about that, I think will really attract folks. And then setting up your organization for success. We've done several projects around recruitment and retention, and I mean, many of you in the room will probably nod your heads when I say this, but the hiring practices, while there's a process, it really varies from department to department. How those processes are implemented, how connected the program is or the hiring manager is with HR and personnel, right? Do we just follow the letter of the law, or do we try to figure out how to make it work? Do we just use the same interview questions that we've used the last 15 years, or do we come up with new questions for the job that we're looking for? Do we do things like require a statement of qualifications or writing samples to help suss out and identify the key resources that are going to be a good fit for whatever you're looking for? And there's some things that you can do to make sure that you're ready for success from a process standpoint. And then closing the deal. That's really about onboarding. I don't know if you guys are familiar with onboarding, but that's what happens when someone takes that job offer, shows up the first day, and then gets the manuals of, here's how we do it in the state, right? And then about 6 years later, they figure it out. It's hard, right? If you haven't grown up in state service, it's hard to know how to get things done. And so what can we do as organizations to help support folks? Can we give them buddies, you know, so that they have somebody you can go ask those questions of? Do we have trainings for them to get them up to speed on program issues and program components? Do we take advantage of what they have to offer? You know, flip it around. You know, what did they learn when they were, you know, in their previous career, in their previous job and organization? Did they learn continuous improvement in business process reengineering? Did they learn how to use technology differently? How can the state agency or the department leverage that experience? There's different ways to set up programs to take advantage of that. All right, so we're going to whip through this. So this first ingredient, we talked about it in terms of broadening your focus. Well, this is an interesting concept. So when you have multiple generations in the workplace, how do you handle that? This is an interesting construct. If you take a minute to look at it, you bring in a manager, maybe someone at Gen X mid-career level. You team them up with a supervisor or a worker, an experienced worker who's maybe a baby boomer generation person a couple years away from retirement, and the millennial worker, and create relationships with them, informal and formal, to help mentor and create trusted advisor opportunities so that they're learning from each other, right? It's not just strictly hierarchical, you report to me, you do what I say, et cetera. It's how do we work together in a team to leverage our experience and what we have to offer. So just, something to think about in terms of a partnering approach to different generations. And don't forget, you'll get these slides. I know some of you are feverishly writing, don't worry. You can read these and share them with your friends. Celebrate the benefits. 50% of young professionals prefer flexibility and mobility to higher salaries. And this gets to the point, and that's the challenge within state government around, the perception that the pay is low. Well, the pay is low, and we all know that the benefits are very rich, right? The tangible and intangible benefits are very rich. But the fact that it's a stable work environment for the most part. That's very attractive, right? So how do you sell that? How do you document it? How do you articulate it? And then finding ways to reward talent that's not based on money, right? Is it recognition programs? Is it special training? Is it promotional opportunities that you help create for someone? There's different ways to reward folks that we have to get probably more creative about, and probably share some ideas and share some ways that have been effective to reward everyone. The branding component, that destination piece. So how do you brand yourself as a destination employer? Well, we all know that you can tell everybody you're a destination employer, and that's fine, but if nobody believes it because everybody's leaving, or nobody wants to fill out your applications because nobody wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole, you know, that's what you have to work on. But from a branding standpoint, how do you brand the value that you create, your department creates, your program creates, or even, you know, state service as a whole creates? That's an exercise that's important from an executive and management and staff level to do for recruiting, but also from a morale and culture building effort within an organization as well. So here's just some examples and ideas that we've seen from the federal government and from some other places. And then setting the organization up for success, talked a little bit about this already in terms of recruiting practices, making sure that what you're looking for is aligned to the right candidates. And again, sometimes that's hard with the classifications that you're working with in your particular department. You may need X, the classifications ask for X, Y, and Z. You get lots of Y's and Z's, you're not getting X. You know, that's hard to work through. But there's ways to do it. Other departments have done it. And, you know, one of the key success factors that I've seen in a couple of the departments we've worked in is the tight relationship between personnel and the program or the hiring manager, so that it's a team effort to try to figure out how to solve that problem. Do job classifications and duty statements match the requirements? So duty statements are very important. And you guys know this, I'm sure. When you're looking at advertising for a position, making sure that duty statement really reflects what you're looking for. Not what you were looking for 15 years ago when it was last updated, but what are you looking for this position? Things have changed, programs have changed, the technology and skills have changed, the analytical skill needs have changed, making sure those are refreshed and up to date. And then branding and marketing strategies. Who knows about your department from a recruiting standpoint? What campuses are you working with? Are you working with the statewide recruiters to make sure they know what your needs are and what kind of specific skills and talents you're looking for? How can you do that more effectively to get out there and have your department and organization really shine? Social sourcing. So this is becoming more and more of a challenge and an opportunity, right? Many job postings are now on, you know, Monster and some of the other online job boards. And there's, you know, 7 ideas here of different ways you can use social media to help. But one of the key ones here is number 3, and I put a very fancy yellow star next to it. Attracting candidates by creating small online communities. How many of you are on LinkedIn? Okay, so probably about half of the room. So this is, I'm not promoting LinkedIn, although it's free, I guess, but I mean, that's a great tool to think about creating a community that talks about Program X. And Program X has our strategic plan going out. Program X has this challenge. What do people on LinkedIn think about it? And creating a conversation through a tool like that to see who that attracts. And the folks who are, you know, commenting or providing ideas through that online community could be recruitment candidates, right? So just using different tools that are out there in a different way to identify folks that maybe wouldn't be on your radar, or you wouldn't be on their radar, because they didn't know what you did. But now they've been a part of the conversation and they understand a little bit more about the impact. All right, closing the deal, onboarding tips. Want to make sure, sorry, we get to the panel. Onboarding, so making sure, as I said before, that you're figuring out how to get people up to speed as soon as possible, how you're pairing them with somebody who can help them navigate what they need to navigate, and then how you're taking advantage of what they have to offer, right? It's not just a one-way thing, it's what they have to offer as well. Oh, and learning and development. Shifting from train and deploy to participate and learn, right? So gone are the days of traditional education, right? Now we get things in so many different ways. We get them through videos and reading articles and going to sessions and workshops and having active learning opportunities. Thinking about how that shift is happening within your organization is important as well. What kind of brown bag lunches can you facilitate to help bring the new staff up to speed faster? What kind of opportunities can you give folks to present to their colleagues so that they can get new skills and prepare them for their leadership opportunities? There's different ways to use training as a staff, not only staff development, but staff growth and opportunity creator. All right, we're going to get to the panel. So Stephanie and Lyndon. So Stephanie I've known a long time. Stephanie used to work at Deloitte, and we miss her desperately. But Stephanie went to the university, or she went to Stanford undergrad, University of Southern California, and got her degree in, was it MPP or MPA?
MPA.
MPA, a Master's in Public Administration. And then she worked for Deloitte for a few years, and then worked for several state commissions and was an executive fellow, working in the governor's office and working with the Fair Political Practices Commission, is that correct? And then now for DMV, she's responsible for a performance management program over at DMV, including strategic planning, governance, performance management, and customer survey programs. So sure she has some interesting stories with that responsibility. And Lyndon joined us mid-career as well, which is an interesting one. He was a chiropractor for 10 years. Is that about right? 10 years, and decided he wanted more stability and predictability in his career, and so he decided to join state service. He started out with correctional health care, correct? Is that right? And then went to the Energy Commission and now is at finance. So, and both of them have had a variety of experience in different organizations. So I want to turn it over to you, both Stephanie and Linda. Maybe Stephanie, you can start. So what was your experience like joining state service from the public sector?
Well, good morning, everyone. So as Julie said, I came to the state after having worked with Deloitte Consulting's public sector consulting practice, as well as having done project management with Blue Shield of California. I used probably a less traditional door to get into state service, which is I did the Executive Fellowship Program, which is a short-term fellowship that gives individuals an opportunity to work in state service for about 10 months to get a robust exposure and practical firsthand knowledge in state government administration. From there, I moved over to an exempt appointment position and then eventually transferred or applied for and was accepted for my current position with the Department of Motor Vehicles. And my experience coming over to state government was, I think, it was interesting when you go from a kind of consulting project-based work into a state government agency that has a long established program, very robust operations. So I did have some learning opportunities in terms of transitioning into the new culture that I was working in within state government. You know, some of it is the obvious of coming to any new organization, understanding their terminology, their processes, getting to know the organization, who knows what, who do I go to if my PC is broken, oh my gosh, my badge won't let me in, who's going to make sure I actually get to my desk on time today. And then some of it was because I hadn't grown up in state service, learning state processes and terminology. So I was used to saying FTEs. Well, in the state we talk about PYs. BCP, well, tell me a little bit more about how that's done. And then I came into an organization where my work was very different. I was used to working on projects that came together for a very specific objective. Sometimes it took us multiple years to achieve that objective, but the idea was at some point we would deliver a solution, an application, and disband. I came into an organization where there was a true ongoing program, where there was a history of operations and policy. And yeah, we did projects along the way, but people didn't have an expectation of moving on in 2 years or 3 years. They understood that they were in there for a long-term career. And that's what really struck me specifically about coming to the DMV, and we have a few folks out in the audience today who can speak to it, which is the DMV has a very defined culture in terms of employees who are very committed to the mission of the organization. And when they come to the department, they come for life. So it is not uncommon to have individuals who have worked there for 15, 20, 25 years. Yesterday, we had our Employee of the Month presentation, and a woman was being honored, and she got up, and her daughter was there, who is also a DMV employee, who also happens to be a graduate of our DMV daycare center. We've had a DMV daycare since 1975, and I thought, now that is a statement of the DMV family. You know, not only did she grow up on our first floor, but she's also come back to work here. And that was a transition for me. I was not used to people who could tell you about the decision that was made in 1980 and why that decision was made. And it was also a transition to come to a large organization with a lot of layers. I was used to working in very flat organizations where decisions could be made very quickly with a small number of people, and there was a certain amount of empowerment because things needed to get done. And I was very fortunate in making my transition that I had some fabulous resources within the department who were mentors, who were very willing to share their experience, who coached me when I screwed up. Not that I have ever made any mistakes, but who were very generous in sharing their knowledge, and who were also very generous in giving me opportunities and helping me to course correct as I was going along. So when Julie talks about that idea of a buddy, I think that my experience coming into state service has been made so much richer by the fact that there were those baby boomers who were really ready and willing to invest in helping me to succeed in my position.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. Lyndon, you want to talk about your experience?
Sure. So if you would ask me about 20 years ago, do you see yourself working for the state of California? I would say no. I actually grew up in Canada, and so the chances of me even being here are just remote. So essentially, I went away to school to California, yay, met my wife. This was a chiropractic college. We opened our clinic in late 1999 to early 2000, and things were good. So essentially, by about 2003, 2004, there had been a significant, we'll call it workers' comp reform, and there was two of us practicing, and we really only had income for one of us. So soon thereafter, about 2006, 2007, we had that kitchen table conversation where it's like, honey, we're running out of money, somebody needs to get a job. So I drew the short straw, and I didn't know what to expect. Here I am, like, I grew up in another country, but I lived in Sacramento, so I kind of knew a little bit about state service, because, you know, your neighbors and, you know, a lot of people obviously work for the state here. And I basically pounded the pavement. I did it the old-fashioned way, where you had to kind of, you know, submit 1 million applications, figure out what testing and lists were, and what is this? Like, this doesn't make sense, and if you're reachable, and so forth and so on. And my actually success rate was pretty good. I actually had 2 job offers in about my first 3 or 4 months of looking. So this wasn't too bad. And then I started with prison healthcare. And I can say it was great. I liked it. I had no idea what to expect. But my kind of maybe big fear about working for the state was, oh my gosh, I'm going to be stuck in some cube staring at a calendar all day, bored to death. And the thing is, the state's not like that. The state, you can make it what you want, and the good thing about the state, you can kind of move around a little bit and promote. And so that's kind of the path I've followed, and I've been blessed, and I'm happy with it. So I went from prison healthcare, which I thought was a great start to the States, a lot of drama, a lot of interest. And I don't mean
They're all saying, come to my department, there's drama too.
But it's very interesting. It's, you know, and I was in healthcare. I'd been in healthcare for over a decade, and I'm kind of like, wow, this is really interesting, what they're trying to do here. And then, but I always had that kind of need or desire to burn, to kind of get interested in politics. And, you know, I love public policy, even though I hadn't, you know, gone to school for public policy. And so, like, just as an FYI, so I grew up in Canada, and there's something called question period, which is like Prime Minister's questions. You ever seen that on C-SPAN? Mm-hmm. Probably not, okay? For the geeks out there, this is when the opposition can ask the Prime Minister any question they want. So in Canada, they do something similar, because it's a similar system. I used to get home from college, I loved watching that. That was like my favorite thing. Nonetheless, so So I like always kind of followed this path. I wanted to get into legislation. I thought that was so interesting. So I went to the Energy Commission, worked in their lead shop, which again, I knew nothing about energy and very little about legislation, but I made it work. You kind of grow and you grow with it, and you were supported along the way. And then I moved to finance a couple of years ago, which again is lots of, interesting like policy and, legislation, and it's very interesting. So that's in a nutshell my experience.
Okay, great. And so, thank you for that. And maybe Stephanie, for you, because I think we've talked about this a little bit, what has been your experience trying to bring folks in mid-career? What are some of the, lessons learned or best practices that you would share? I know I sound like a consultant, don't I? Sorry.
Well, so it's interesting. My team is primarily comprised of SSA and AGPA positions. And so over the last few years, particularly with the change in the economy, we have seen a significant increase in the number of folks, those who would fall in that range of Gen X, who are looking for a career change. And it's been, to your point, I think, the point about debunking the stereotype of state service and the idea, particularly, come on, DMV, right? You have to get a little bit over that, the late night comedian stereotype. We've been very fortunate that we have had a lot of people who have been interested in the work that my office is doing. So I think DMV is doing a lot of innovative work. We have a very strategic focus on enhancing customer service. So my experience has been seeing a significant increase in applications coming in from people who either want that work-life balance or who are looking at they want a career change. I can't tell you the number of candidates we've interviewed who have said, I've managed in private industry, I know I can manage, I am tired of managing. And for those of you who are managers out there, you know that it's both a it's a blessing to manage, but it also does have its challenges at time. And so we've really been focused on bringing those folks in, and I think we can talk a little bit more about kind of how that interview and recruitment process works, as well as the onboarding process. But my experience right now has been a significant influx and significant interest.
Great, great. Well, actually, in terms of timing, we probably have to move on. But we have one more polling question for everyone, then we'll have a few minutes for questions and answers, and maybe we can get into that then. So the next one is, what are the barriers to the approach of bringing in this kind of mid-career talent into state service? What do you think the barriers are? Or what do you know the barriers are because you've been trying it? We want to hear from you. Yes?
I think the salary levels.
Okay, the salary levels, okay. Let's make sure we get it up here, because we're going to share this with different control agencies. Anonymously, yes, of course. Yes. The hiring process, salary, minimum quals. Mm-hmm. A barrier, utilizing social media to recruit. That'd be interesting to hear more about whoever said that. You don't have to necessarily, raise your hand now, but we'd love to hear more about that in terms of if there's challenges in using social media to bring folks in. Okay, so while the answers are trickling in, I want to open it up. We have just about 5 more minutes for questions and answers. If folks have questions for myself or for the panel, happy to share other thoughts and ideas. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
I guess kind of going off the money aspect, when you're recruiting for positions that are very specific and particular, and you're competing with companies that can offer higher pay, do you have any recommendations on how to kind of convince them of the benefits? We kind of touched base on, the retirement, the stability, the work-life balance. But for the younger generation, it's difficult for them to see that because they only see that they really want to work hard and make money.
Right, that short-term view, yeah. So, yeah, Stephanie or Linda, do you guys have a perception on that?
I would build upon like a kind of what I would call a total compensation argument. Your benefits in the state are by far better than just about everybody else in the private sector, from healthcare to retirement. The fact that we have a defined benefit pension, is, unheard of almost outside of public service or outside of public service. And even our healthcare benefits, I just looked at the numbers yesterday, about 80% of people in private sector have a deductible in their healthcare, only 30% in state service, and that's usually by choice. So it's night and day compared to what's out there. Now, again, that's a tough argument for a 20-year-old who maybe doesn't have a family and never goes to the doctor, and retirement is 40 years from now. But if you could maybe make a what I would call a total compensation argument, it might work.
Yeah.
And I think then sometimes the argument around the other intangibles of what is going to be the nature of the work, what are going to be the transferable skills they're able to develop, to be able to say that the position that you're applying for is going to put you on a path to upward mobility, and to really emphasize the upward mobility options within the state. I mean, it is pretty incredible. You can stay under the state of California umbrella and look, you can work on healthcare, pension reform, energy issues. So I think sometimes it's helping them to see, well, how does maybe a short-term pay hit help to position you for a long-term career path and long-term career success. And I know we've had a lot of success in emphasizing some of the intangibles of the work. So, the work in my office tends to have very high visibility to the department. They have a lot of interactivities or interactions with our deputies and our executive management team. So to be able to talk about how the work they're doing is just as important from a resume and future career development.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think part of the conversation that isn't getting done with compensation comparisons is that there needs to be a way that we take back the civil service values of working for the government.
Mm-hmm.
That's a valuable, purposeful choice for a vocation versus profitability. Not that that's bad per se, but that instead of saying, oh, you make less working for the government, it should be seen as it's valuable what service you provide to the greater good.
Absolutely.
If that were more understood, we would be the employer because people would want to get
Right. And I think that's a really good component of the branding piece of this, right? So it's not just branding, what does your department do, but what is the value that you create, and what is the value that you create for society based on what you're doing, you're choosing to do for a living. There's trade-offs, but how noble is it, right? How much you're affecting the lives of so many millions of people by your job choice. I mean, yeah, I agree. I think that's the branding piece, the messaging that needs to get out.
And there's nothing more exciting than opening up the Bee in the morning and you see something that you worked on. Your name's not mentioned. Thank
Hopefully.
goodness. Thank goodness. But you're like, oh, I worked on that.
Yeah.
And I think that we all, many of us have had that experience, like, wow, I was part of this.
Yeah, take pride in that, for sure. All right, we have time for one more question. Yes?
How do you balance out promoting people from within so that they stay and they feel like there's opportunity versus bringing in new talent from outside? Maybe you don't have great talent inside.
Yeah.
You've been in a situation in the workplace where then the worker bees they started leaving right and left. And I can't get anywhere here.
Oh, yeah. Well, so Stephanie, you want to tackle that one? Because I think that's something we talked about at one point.
Yeah, well,
It's a
it
challenge.
is an interesting challenge, particularly if you're, I mean, with the competitive hiring process, then you're selecting the best qualified candidate. It is a challenge when your best qualified candidate is someone who's external, or you're looking in to bring a skill set that maybe is only found in an external environment. I think that's where part of it is thinking about how are you throughout the year using an individual development plan, performance conversations, so employees really understand how are they doing in their position today. Are they ready to promote? Are they a competitive candidate? And having those interactive performance conversations that help perhaps them have an understanding of how competitive they are, how ready are they for that next step in their career. But it is a challenge, especially when you're asking like that model of have your experienced vet train up the new person. How do you do that without resentment? And a lot of times it's having candid conversations with your staff, I think, to say, hey, you're going to have to cut the new manager some slack. They're coming up to speed, but let me tell you all the great new things they're going to bring to our team. So have a little patience, help them through the onboarding, because we're going to be stronger as a unit once they are fully functioning in their position.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, well, thanks, everybody. I have two things of information for you. First of all, hopefully you enjoyed this session, and happy to answer any questions afterwards. We have two handouts. One is onboarding trends and recruitment trends. just to take a look at, some food for thought. And again, we'll have the slides out on the website. The other one is a plug for the keynote speaker. It's one of my colleagues from Deloitte. He's written 8 books on government transformation, has some really interesting thoughts about the digital age. And we actually have several of his books to hand out as door prizes, because what would a party be without a door prize, right? So somewhere in this room, on some chairs, are green stickers. If you have a green sticker on your chair, you win a book. So bring the green sticker up and get your book. And even if you're not sitting in that chair, get it. Thanks, everyone.